wouldn't have happened otherwise, but it's nice to see him and be here with him.
Yeah. Is he still doing lacrosse at Duke? What was it?
No, he's just playing soccer at Tufts, actually, in Boston.
Oh,
yeah.
My bad.
No, it's hard to keep track.
So he's a senior, right?
He is going to be a senior, yeah. And yeah, I guess he is now. It's crazy. I can't believe we're juniors.
That's weird.
I still can't wrap my head around it.
PRS doesn't feel.
I know, my sister's graduating from PRS tomorrow, so it's weird.
Yeah, virtually, I'm guessing.
Yeah, they're actually doing a graduation at Petco Park, so they're we're all driving, I guess, and we're staying in our cars. I think she might be able to walk across the stage, but it's one person at a time. It's gonna be interesting. It might be a long graduation.
Always PRS.
All right, we are good to go. We're streaming on YouTube. We have started the recording. So let's kick it off, right?
Right.
So a little bit of a modified intro to today's episode. Before we begin today, I'm sure everybody's aware of all the current protests going on around the country. Here at District Reign, we want to observe a moment of silence for the death of George Floyd and all the other victims of police brutality, injustice, and racism in this country. Thank you guys for allowing us to take that moment. And we're going to gently bring it back into our 8th episode of Rain Talks. I'm Matthew Gillick. I'm here with my co-host, Michael Ratner today. We're going to talk to Sierra Enge about the world of college soccer, D1, Stanford, talk a little bit about female athletes on the national scene as well. Welcome.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Matthew. Thanks for that talk you gave earlier. And then I want to introduce Sierra. So Sierra, full disclosure, we did go to high school together. That's how we managed to get you on the show. But Sierra is a D1 athlete for Stanford. She plays in midfield and defense. That's what it says on the Stanford website. And you also are an NCAA D1 champion with Stanford, as well as the U20 CONCACAF women's national team champion. So Sarah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
I have a quick question for Michael though. So you're the second high school connection that he's brought on to the show. What's in the water at your high school, for real? What's going on down there?
You go for it.
I was just gonna say, I think we had a pretty small school, so we built a lot of good connections, and I think our class had a lot of motivated students, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to see such a quality community, because you guys are getting to such high levels academically and soccer professionally, which is fantastic.
Well, our teachers would love to hear you say that. So
yeah,
they're on this. They're on this show, all of them.
Broadcasting nationally.
Yes.
Well, obviously, Sarah, it's a pretty casual show. It's more of a conversation. We want to know more about what your journey, how you got to where you are, how you maintain that at a high level, and also inform our players at District Reign, inspire them, inform them, and see if they have any questions to ask you. get off the screen share now. But so I think I just want to start off with what got you into soccer, essentially. Why soccer as opposed to any other sport, and why did you stick with it?
Yeah, so my both my parents played sports in college. My dad played soccer in college, and so they kind of encouraged me from a young age to just pick up whatever I was interested in. So my older brother played soccer as well, so I kind of followed in his footsteps. But I was playing soccer, volleyball, basketball, lacrosse. I played a little softball, which was not very good at, but I kind of just dabbled in everything. And even when we were in school, I kind of played, especially in middle school, I played multiple different sports. And then kind of once I got to be towards the end of my middle school years, I kind of realized that I loved soccer more than the others and that I really wanted to focus my time on that. So I kind of narrowed it down around that time to playing soccer and lacrosse. And then my sophomore year of high school, I stopped playing lacrosse and really just focused in on soccer. But at the end of the day, it was just purely passion based. I kind of tried a bunch of different things and really fell in love with soccer, and so decided to, spend more time practicing and spend more time driving to practices. And yeah, that's kind of how I got started playing.
Do you think that playing multiple sports in your early development kind of influenced the type of athlete you became?
Yeah, I'm always a big proponent of people playing other sports. I think a lot of times, especially now, youth sports get incredibly specialized, and I think it takes the fun out of the game pretty early because you're focusing on it and it kind of feels like a job. And so I think that mentality wise, that definitely helped me a lot because I just saw sports as something that I love to do and something that brought me a lot of joy. So I think it was really good for me because I was never too focused. Like if I didn't perform well in one soccer game, I could just jump back to another sport. So I definitely think it helped me a lot.
Okay. Well, the next question is a pretty broad overview, so we go dissect a little bit more, but just in general. So can you talk about what your journey was like after you started kind of specializing in soccer, late middle school, high school, and how that process evolved throughout high school and right up until college? So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough because my dad actually was my coach for a while, which was really awesome. So he coached me kind of right around that time where I was starting to become more serious around soccer. So after playing with him, I moved to a team that was a little bit more competitive. And that was right around sixth grade. I started playing with that new team in seventh grade, and I played with them for 3 years. And that's where I definitely started to develop a little bit more just because I was playing with better players. And at that time, I still just was kind of oblivious to the broader soccer world. So I didn't really know much about US camps or college soccer. I was just playing. And I got invited to a few like US training center things, which weren't really that big of a deal, but we had probably about 20 girls come in just in SoCal and train together. So it was kind of like an elite group in SoCal. And so I went to a few of those, which was really, really fun just to be able to play with some better players. And then from there, I actually had one of the coaches that was at those recommend me for a U14 national team, which I didn't even know existed. So I actually went into my first one in eighth grade. I missed our eighth grade trip to Washington, D.C. actually to go to the camp. So that kind of was where my journey started with U.S. soccer. And then I kind of just was pulled in from there. I went to the next two U14 camps, and that was kind of the cycle for U14. We only had 3. And then from there, I went in with the U17 team for a little while. They were preparing for World Cup. I didn't make the World Cup roster, but I was training with them. And that's kind of where I would say I got recognized by Stanford. I was playing on a pretty good club team, so they would come to a lot of our games. But then just having that additional piece of playing on national teams definitely helped. So I committed to Stanford when I was a sophomore in high school, which is early, but I kind of knew that that was what I wanted just because I could combine two things that were really important to me, both soccer and my academic ever since. I obviously was just in with the 20s, but it definitely has not been a super straight path like everyone. I've had some setbacks. I tore my ACL, so I was out of the system for a little while. I redshirted my freshman year of high school or of college, so definitely some bumps in the road and wasn't quite called back into some of those camps. But yeah, most recently I was in with the 20s, and now I'm just kind of waiting to see see what happens next and if we get a college season and what we can expect for the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about what the process was like as a sophomore in high school committing to a D1 school?
Yeah, so the process has totally changed now. And to be honest, I don't really know all of the rules because I know that they've definitely pushed back dates to kind of discourage people from committing that early, because there are a lot of transfers, especially for female athletes. But yeah, I was really lucky because my dad obviously had experience with this, and my brother played soccer too and kind of was going through similar things. So he kind of knew what to expect. So I was actually going on visits my freshman year, which was a little wild because I really didn't know what college was like and I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't have any criteria or anything. But my club that I was playing for had some college liaisons. So I sat down with them and my parents my freshman year, and I was very fortunate because I was able to kind of, and my list was very small. I think I had 5 or 6 colleges on that list. And I was like, okay, these are the ones that I'm going to focus on because this is a school that I could see myself playing at. And this is a school that has super strong academics. And that was really important for me. So I kind of had already heard from those coaches and built relationships with them and talked to them and went on some unofficial visits. It was all very weird because I could call the coaches, but the coaches couldn't call me. And then I could go on visits, but they couldn't pay for me to be on the visit. So it was all just kind of like borderline okay, but that's just how people did it. So yeah, I visited a bunch of, and then I decided to commit my sophomore year just because I felt comfortable and I felt like I knew that Stanford was the place that I wanted to be at. Luckily, I wasn't rushed because I know a lot of other people have been kind of put under pressure by coaches being like, you need to commit by this date. And it felt pretty natural for me, but I definitely am glad that they've pushed back the recruiting timeline, because thinking back on it, like no sophomore.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in picking Stanford because I love it, but it could have been easy for me to choose somewhere where I wouldn't really know what I was going to get and wouldn't be happy with the experience.
Were there any like kind of performance clauses that were put into your commitment? Like if you don't do this senior year, then you won't be able to maintain or anything like that?
No. So what happens is it's also very, it's not, the commitment that I made my sophomore year was not certain at all, because you can make a verbal commitment, but you don't sign anything until your senior year. So they have like a signing day your senior year. So I made a verbal commitment to Stanford, and the coaches made a verbal commitment to me that I would be going there and they would be having me. But it was a constant communication because Stanford has a very high academic bar. So at a lot of other schools, it's just like, okay, you've made this commitment, you're going to get in, here we go. But for me and my teammates, it wasn't like that. We had a lot of conversations about what our grades needed to be at and what we needed to be doing in order to get into the school and not just be there for soccer. So there was no clause, but there was just always this, like, I always knew that if my grades weren't good enough or I wasn't playing well enough, like they could easily back out, and in just the same way I could have easily backed out. So it was not a firm commitment at all, but that's just kind of how everyone had been doing it.
How'd you find that? You know, you have to keep your grades up, keep playing good soccer. Back in your mind, you're thinking, I gotta keep this performance level high. How did you balance your time while you were in high school with those kinds of considerations?
Yeah, I mean, the way you just made it sound a lot more stressful than it felt. I was just loving playing soccer, and I wasn't really that concerned. I mean, I could have a few bad games, and they weren't going to be like, "Oh, we're not taking you anymore." So, as long as my performance was just continuing to improve over time, was what they were looking for, and that's what I wanted for me too. So I was working hard, doing that, and then I mean, Pacific Ridge, where we went to high school and middle school, is definitely a place that kind of encourages curiosity and encourages learners. And so I kind of jumped into that, and I am usually pretty passionate about my schoolwork. So I kind of just use that as a way to dive deeper into it. And it was definitely a little challenging because I was traveling a decent amount in high school. So missing weeks at a time was not super easy. So I definitely had to sacrifice my social life a little bit to kind of make up my classes or go to practice or do something like that. But I really enjoyed my high school experience. And honestly, the biggest thing, and I know everyone talks about it, is just time management. Like, I was really good about getting my homework done in the little periods of the day that I had free. And I knew that, if I was going to hang out with my friends this weekend, that I needed to get my homework done earlier so that I could go to practice and hang out with them. Like, just kind of thinking through that kind of stuff was really helpful for me.
Yeah, I can imagine it's really helpful for the coaches as well, because I get excuses all the time. Oh, I have to finish this project. I have to finish
Yeah.
homework, right? And it's really important to be on top of time management, especially at the highest levels.
Yeah, definitely.
On time management, talking about development, how much time, as you got scouted by Stanford, you got scouted by a national team. How much time did you spend outside of team training, just training by yourself or training with your dad?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I'd say like in my first 2 years of high school, I was practicing twice a week. So, and then obviously we had games on the weekend. So I was training a pretty decent amount on my own. I would probably train at least twice more during the week on my own, just doing little things. Again, it was mostly just stemmed from my passion. It didn't feel like I needed to be out there, and it didn't feel like a chore, but it was kind of just something fun for me to go do after school. So I definitely did spend a lot of time, and I really enjoyed it. And my dad was a huge piece of it because he would always be out there with me. And I also have a younger sister and older brother who play pretty competitively. So it was super fun to be able to kind of jump into stuff with them. But I think once I kind of got to my last 2 years of high school, there was definitely less time to be kind of working on my own, because there's obviously a balance of wanting to continue to improve, but also overtraining. So we had practices 3 to 4 days a week. So I wouldn't do as much like individually on different days, but I would try to add in like a 10-minute, 10 minutes after a training to focus on something super specific that I individually want to work on. So right now, like, I am working on long driven balls, and I will add in 10 minutes at the end of the training I do with anyone just to focus on that. And so I think that that's kind of a good area that people can just work on something that's a little more personal and a little more specific to their game, and not necessarily feel like it's a huge chore, or it's going to take up a lot of time, or it's going to make them feel tired before their game, but just a little something to kind of help improve.
Good insight.
Well, I want to ask a question. It's probably every young soccer player's dream. It's the national team call up. You were saying that at the U14 level, it was a little bit more informal. Can you talk about what that process was like at the youth level and how you developed through that program?
Yeah, so U.S. soccer is changing a lot right now through the pandemic. But when I was in the U14 cycle, they had a U14, a U17, a U18, and a U23, and then the full team. And since then, they had kind of added, since I went in with the 14s, they've added a 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So they have basically a team for every age group. But when I went into camp as a 14, as a U14, we got in there and they showed us this pyramid. So it started with, the U14 age group, and then it went up, and all the way at the top of the pyramid was the full national team. And the way that they described it to us was at the bottom, you have all of these players, and the number of players just starts to dwindle down until you reach the full national team. So once you're kind of in the system, there's definitely a clear path in with the full team. But at the same time, most of the girls on the full team haven't been in a bunch of youth camps, so it's not super straight. And they make that very clear. It's definitely very clear to us how hard it is to make the national team, and they kind of use it as a motivator. So it's like, you have the opportunity, you're here, but it's a huge step from where you are to making the full team. So I think it's definitely a really cool program to be involved in, because when I was 14, I was into camps and they were treating us like we were professionals. Like, we would wake up in the morning and have our, team meals, and then we'd train, and then we'd have meetings in the middle of the day, and then we'd train in the afternoon. And, we were expected to be hydrated. We had hydration tests, and we had all these things. And we had a lot of informational meetings about, how to game manage, how to eat properly, how to train properly. So it was definitely, the U14 age group was definitely kind of the information stage. So we learned a lot of things. We learned how to kind of be professional athletes at 14, which wasn't super serious and wasn't probably what it actually is like, but kind of just some general information. And then going in with the 17s was more focused towards the World Cup, and same thing with the 20s. So the 17s and 20 age groups are definitely focused on competing, and a little bit, we weren't necessarily looking at, okay, here are the steps to make the national team, here's what you need to do. But it's really cool to be a part of it, because we're in our meetings, we're scouting who we're going to play, and we're talking about our tactics, and we're building a team from players all over the country. So we're working on how to get to know each other better, and how to build bonds, and how to build really strong relationships so that we can be successful in the field. So every age group is totally different, but it's definitely a really cool program to be a part of, just because it allows for a lot of development. Being in those teams challenges you a lot, and the coaches challenge you, and they ask a lot out of you, and they kind of help you find areas and room for improvement. And yeah, they can help you kind of grow and develop. And so I've been really lucky to be a part of it. But we'll see what happens after COVID. The full national team will definitely still be there, but I don't know how many youth teams they'll have.
Oh, it sounds like a pretty incredible journey. And then I know you mentioned you had some trouble near the transition from high school to college with the ACL tear. And I was just curious, how can you talk us through like the recovery process and the kind of mentality you had to have to get over an injury like that and return to a really high level?
Yeah, so I actually I tore my ACL playing high school soccer, which was a little unfortunate. I was on turf, and I was wearing cleats, not studs, but I was wearing cleats, and my right foot got stuck in the ground when I went to turn. And I was really lucky because I wasn't in that much pain. I felt my sister was right next to me on the field. I guess she heard a pop. I didn't really hear anything, but I went down and I immediately grabbed my knee, because the ACL is the female soccer player's injury. Like, everyone knows about it, and everyone's a little bit in fear of having it. So I immediately grabbed my knee, and I was like, oh no, this is not good. My dad and my mom were there. My dad actually came down to the field, and I shuffled side to side, because I was like, if I can't shuffle side to side, then like, I know it's my ACL, because the ACL is responsible for your lateral movement. And I could shuffle side to side, so I had hope. And then I went to go see the PT, and he was basically like, I think this is torn, but you should go and get an MRI. And I got an MRI. Luckily, I got all the results pretty quickly, which was good. And I found out probably like 3 days after I had gotten hurt that I had torn it. And I remember they called my dad, and I was sitting on the couch at home, and he kind of walked in and he was just told me, and I started crying, obviously. And then I kind of had decided there and talking through it with my dad that I was going to cry and that it was totally fine to be upset. But from then on out, it wasn't going to be something that I was upset about. It was just going to be something that I was going to come back from. So I worked really hard in PT. I did some PT before I actually had surgery, just to kind of help the swelling go down, because right after I tore it, I really, like, it was so big and it was really hard to walk. So all the swelling had kind of come down. I was super nervous for surgery. I'd never had stitches. I'd never been injured before. So I was terrified. And yeah, I went into surgery. It went really well. I was actually able to walk. The doctors were like, you can get up and start kind of building that muscle back as soon as possible. So some people who tear their ACLs also tear their meniscus. And if you do that, and they have to stitch it up, you can't walk on it for 3 weeks, I believe. So that kind of slows down the process. But luckily I just tore my ACL. So I started kind of walking on it very gingerly. I don't even know if walking is the correct term, but the first day I just tried to get moving, and my recovery was really smooth, and I'm really grateful. I worked with some PTs down or here in San Diego, and the main PT that I worked with was super incredible. He gave so much time and energy to me, and we would be in the gym. I was there 4 days a week working, and I was doing as much as I could on my own. One big thing that you can do when you tear your ACL is be on a stationary bike, because you're not pounding. I couldn't run for a little while. You're not pounding, but you're still getting strength in your legs and you're building your endurance. So I would go to the YMCA right down the street and bike for hours. But it was definitely hard because I wasn't able to touch a soccer ball for a little while, which was something that had brought me so much joy. So I would sit down and try to juggle with my left leg on the ground because I couldn't stand on my right, but I also couldn't kick the ball with my right foot. So that was definitely a hard piece of it, but I really took my time. I ended up taking a year off of soccer and coming back kind of when I felt totally comfortable, because there's also a huge kind of uncertainty about coming back in a lot of re-tears, especially in female athletes. So definitely took time and made sure that I was fully ready. And I went to practice for a while and made sure that I was fit before I started and played in my first game. And the very first game I came back and played in, I played against one of my teammates now at Stanford, Katie Meyer, who played in goal, and her team beat us 6-0 that day. So it was definitely a rude awakening to come back into a game and just be running all over the field. But it was definitely a slow and long process. And yeah, anyone who's going through an injury, I would just say, like, look at what you can do every day. Don't try to rush it, because that never leads to anything good, but really just focus on how you can improve every day and kind of take it day by day, because that's what helped me.
I think that's good advice just in life as well.
Yeah.
Working on the things you can control. Would you say that would be kind of the toughest challenge that you had in your career so far?
Yeah, I would say that was one of, the other thing was just my freshman year in college. I came onto a kind of incredible Stanford team. They had just won the national championship right before I got there. And we had a stacked team. Like I played defense and midfield. Our defenders that were out there were one girl who's playing at PSG right now, and then Tierna Davidson, who's on the full national team. And then our midfield had all these crazy studs who were going into the NWSL right after. So our senior class was pretty amazing. And so I knew kind of going in that I wasn't probably going to play that much, just because midfield and defenders, you don't really sub them. So I kind of went in with that mentality, but I'd never really thought about redshirting and what that necessarily means. And for people who don't know what it means, it basically just means there's 4 years of eligibility in college that you have to play. And so you can take 1 year of not playing so that I can play 4 years down the line. So basically my freshman year, I didn't play, and now I'll play my sophomore, junior, senior, and then I have a 5th year that I can play. So it was definitely a hard thing because the coaches kind of called me into their office and suggested it. And they said, this is obviously up to you, but we have a game in 3 days, or it wasn't even 3 days. It was like, we have a game tomorrow, I think. And you have to decide before then, because if you play in the game, you're no longer eligible for the red shirt because you've already played. And so I kind of was pretty upset about it at first and talked to my parents, but I realized at the end of the day that it was definitely the best thing for me because I kind of wanted 4 years to make a significant impact on the program, and I didn't really want to waste a year of playing 5 or so minutes in meaningless games. So at the end of the day, it was definitely the right decision, but it was kind of something that was hard to come to just because I didn't really expect it. And I think everyone goes into college being super excited to get on the field and immediately make a difference, but it's not super easy, especially at top schools. So it was definitely a little shocking at first, but I'm super grateful that I was able to do that.
So I was curious, you saying that it was, oh, sorry, Matthew, want to go for it?
Go ahead.
It's a stacked team you're coming into, and I was curious on the transition because you're coming from an environment, high school club, where you're at the top of your game. You're probably one of the best players at the club in high school, and you come in and all of a sudden you're a sub again. You're one of the bench players again. How did you keep your mentality in that new environment where you had to prove yourself again to a whole new group of players, basically?
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of people aren't necessarily prepared for, and I don't think I was prepared for either, is that most of the girls that come into college were the top player on their club teams, right? They were the star. They played every single minute of every game, never got subbed. And then all of a sudden you jump into college where every single person was like that on their club team. And especially at Stanford, every single person was clearly the shining star on their team. So it's definitely a hard transition because you are fighting for your spot every single day. You're fighting for minutes every single day. And so my mentality kind of going through it was just, one of my favorite mantras is control the controllables and control what you can control. And so I knew that I couldn't, change the coaches' minds and make me start every game. So my mentality was just play as hard and as best as you can every practice and never let if one weekend I don't get that many minutes, never let that change how hard or how I train in practice. And I think that was super helpful for me because I just kind of remained consistent, and I think the coaches could rely on me to be consistent in games. And I think a lot of that stemmed from practice, but it's definitely a hard thing, and mentally it's challenging. I think a lot of college athletes go through it, but you really just have to remain super confident in yourself and know that the coaches need to do what's best to win. And sometimes you're not going to be in that starting group, and there's really nothing that you may be able to do about it. So the only thing you can really control is going out there and giving it your best and seeing what happens, and then just being okay with what does happen.
That's kind of, I have a loaded question concerning kind of like your redshirt year. You're going through all these things, you're training. What else were you doing other than like focusing on academics and, working with the team? What else was going on during that redshirted season?
Yeah, it was also my first year in college, which is a little challenging too. So I thought I was going to see my parents a lot in the fall because I thought I was going to be playing all the time, or maybe not playing all the time, but getting a few minutes here and there. So I thought they would kind of come to some games, but because I wasn't playing, my brother plays college soccer in Boston, so they ended up flying to a lot more of his games just to go watch him. He's a grade above me, so he was definitely getting some more time on the field. So I didn't see them as much as I had kind of thought. So that was definitely a little bit hard at first, just because the homesickness is definitely something that a lot of people experience. But I think being in college and just kind of building new relationships really helped me through that time because I was still a part of the team just as much as every single other person. So I was still there at the games, cheering people on. I just wasn't getting on the field. So I was still kind of with the team, training, doing all of that, doing everything they were doing. And then obviously the adjustment to Stanford is a little challenging just in the classroom. So I was, going to whatever office hours or tutoring I could get if I needed help, and doing kind of the same things that I was doing, I would say, in high school, of just time management and really using the free time that I did have to work on my homework, and then taking advantage of the people at Stanford and the new relationships that I was able to make. Because my best friends are there, and it's super fun to just be with them, and they definitely helped me get through that period, because it is a bummer not stepping on the field, and you are just as much as part of the team, but there are definitely times where you don't feel like it. But they kind of helped me to realize that, just because I'm not on the field doesn't mean I'm not making an impact.
Fantastic. You talked a little bit about the academic rigor. How did you transition to being a full-time athlete your sophomore year, plus games, plus trainings, plus, the same academics that you were doing first year?
Yeah, it was pretty similar to my freshman year, honestly, but I think that the high school that me and Michael went to did a really good job of preparing us for college. Our classes were challenging there, so I didn't feel like it was actually a crazy step. I think that the biggest challenge for me was just that there was a lot less support. At the high school we went to, we were kind of walked through everything. Like, this is how you write the essay, and here's a week to write it. Whereas in college, I was given the prompt 2 days before it's due. And so just kind of figuring that piece out definitely took some time. But I was kind of by my sophomore year, I feel like I'd gotten it down, and I kind of knew how to manage my time and work through the workload, and kind of, use people as resources. Like, if a teammate had taken the class before, I would ask them to help me go through this, or I would go to office hours, or I would work on it with another person in my class, just to get a different perspective. And I also just think that in college you have so many resources, and people don't always take advantage of them. And so kind of towards the end of my freshman year and into my sophomore year, I started to take advantage of them. So we have like at Stanford, we have these writing tutors, so you can go in and they'll look at your essay with you before you turn it in. So I would make use of those. And then I would go to like professor office hours to talk to them about how, I was using this book we talked about in class in an argument or anything like that. But I think the biggest thing that has helped me to be successful in the classroom at Stanford is just using resources.
I want to make sure we have enough time for some of the players to ask some questions. So I wanted to go over quickly, your off field, off practice routine in terms of diet and injury preventiveness. So if you could just talk a little bit about how you make sure you're eating the right things, and also how you make sure you're doing what you can to avoid injuries just off the practice field.
Yeah, so right around the time I tore my ACL, I decided to go gluten-free, just to help with inflammation on my knee. So I did that for a while and definitely felt a difference. And then in the past little bit, I've kind of started to eat it again, just because I think it's not a bad thing to eat. I think it's a little bit condemned in social media right now, but I don't think it's a bad thing to eat at all. So I've been kind of reintroducing that back in. But I think like the biggest thing is, I forget where I heard it, but there's a nutritionist that was talking about when you go in to a grocery store, if you stick to the outsides of the store, you're good. So the outsides of the store are like the refrigerated pieces and the fresh produce, whereas the middle of the store is the processed goods. And so that's kind of always just stuck with me. I try to eat kind of as natural as I can. A lot of vegetables, good lean proteins. I try not to eat a ton of red meat, just because I feel like it doesn't digest as well for me. But honestly, I think nutrition is a pretty personalized thing. Like, you kind of figure out what works for you. I would definitely recommend to people to try to eat fresh foods and as limit processed foods as much as possible. And then, I think just kind of finding what you think works well and what you feel good after, because that's obviously the most important piece, is like, you want to perform well. So what makes you feel good? And then in terms of injury prevention, definitely like weightlifting has been pretty important just to kind of build strength. We do that a lot at Stanford, and I do that a lot at home. And then specifically for ACL, I do a lot of glute work with like mini bands. So trying to activate those as much as possible, which definitely help for injury prevention. So I do that most days before training. And then recovery is also super important for injury prevention. So I try to roll out my feet get pretty tight. So I use the lacrosse ball to roll out the bottoms of my feet, and then my calves, quads, anything else that need it. And then ice baths are awesome. I know they're not everyone's favorite, but I love them. We have a cold tub at Stanford, so I try to get in that pretty much every day after practice just to help my legs recover so they can feel fresher and to kind of limit fatigue and injury.
Awesome. Appreciate the tips. Do you want to go into some questions from the players now, Matt? Or
Yeah. So we had a training last night, and one of the players, we're kind of talking about this episode. One of the players was interested in what's been the most sensational part of your career so far.
Yeah, I think I would have to say winning the national championship this past year, just because my Stanford team is like my family. We are all super, super close and we get along really well. And it was kind of, I was finally getting on the field. I was really enjoying playing, and we had a pretty good year. We only lost one game, and so we were definitely feeling pretty confident going into the tournament. And it was kind of the most incredible thing. We actually had the NCAA championship in San Jose, which is like 25 minutes from Stanford. So the university paid for student tickets and paid for a bus. We had a bunch of students come to the game, and during the final, I mean, I'm sure in the stadium it didn't look super packed, but when I was on the field, you could hear everyone like yelling. And I don't know how many people watched the final, but we went into overtime and then went and finished in PKs, and we ended up winning in PKs. So just hearing people yell, "Go Stanford," when there's a corner kick and there's 10 minutes left of overtime and it's golden goal. So if you score, the game's over. Like, just kind of the excitement of that was super cool. And then for us to win, I mean, I just like, there's no better feeling. We were so excited. We were able to celebrate with our families and go back to Stanford that night and celebrate with our friends on campus. So I think that would have to be my favorite moment so far.
It's a bit of a nerve-wracking game.
Yeah, definitely.
I think one of the biggest parts that I heard about that was how invested that you were in the community and how invested the community was in you. And that's a really big part of the whole game, is really that support and that love on both sides.
Yeah, no, it was really special to have all of our the whole Stanford community was there supporting us, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Going into some of the questions from Instagram, you kind of answered this with the ACL chair, but anything else you'd like to add? The question is, what kind of barriers and obstacles have you faced while trying to come up to this level, and how do you feel like you've overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, I think like my ACL, my redshirt year were definitely two big pieces. I also went through a period of time where I didn't get called into US camps. I got called into one kind of right after I tore my ACL and didn't play very well. And then I didn't get called in for a while, and then got called in my freshman year of college when I was redshirting, and again, didn't play very well and thought I was kind of out of the system. And then there was a coaching change, and literally I didn't even go into the camp before the U20 World Cup qualifying. I literally just was on the roster for the qualifying tournament. And so that was definitely a shock. So there's always going to be failures in anyone's career, and there's always going to be setbacks. And I think the biggest thing is that you just take them as areas to grow and not get too fixated on them, but focus on what you can do. So again, kind of controlling the controllables. After I didn't get called into those camps, I wasn't super focused on getting called back in, because I knew that I didn't necessarily have control over what the coaches thought of me, but I just decided that I was going to focus on how I was playing at Stanford and improving every day. And I think that there are definitely times too in my career so far where, there's something specific that I've been working on and I haven't seen success for a little while I'm working on that. And that happens for everyone. And I think not getting too fixated on that and just knowing that if you stick with it and you keep working hard, you will see improvement.
Awesome. And then our last Instagram question was it like representing the national team, even at the youth level, but, just putting on the USA jersey and representing the national team? What does that feel like?
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible experience. The first time putting on the US uniform is definitely very memorable. I think my first time was actually I was on the U16 team and we went and played in a tournament in Italy. And it was just so cool to be wearing that and to hear the national anthem play before a game. Just makes the game feel very real and very professional and very exciting. So I think it's a complete honor to represent your country and to kind of be fighting for a title. It's pretty cool when we were at the U20s, the qualifying, we were playing against all these other countries and just thinking about like making the US women's national team proud, right? Like the U20s haven't won a World Cup in a long time. And so we were kind of taking that burden on us. And that's our goal, obviously, hopefully when all this kind of ends and we can go back to playing. But we kind of want to represent the entirety of the federation and the entirety of the women's side and do everyone proud. So I think there's definitely kind of an additional weight and kind of a higher thing that you're playing for when you play for the US.
Some of our questions from Zoom are, what do you do before a game? Like, what's your pregame rituals?
Oh yeah, so at Stanford, we usually have a pregame meal, and this is kind of consistent through all the games that I play in now. We have a pregame meal about 3 hours and 45 minutes, usually closer to 4 hours before the game. So that kind of is usually when my game prep begins. So we'll go to that meal. And then I'll usually go and roll out and do a little bit of like stretching, foam rolling sort of thing there. And I like to listen to music during that piece. So I'll go to that and just kind of usually calm music. I just like to chill. That's not kind of my time to be amped. So I'll just relax and just get prepared that way. And then after that, we usually go into a scouting meeting. So we'll go and we'll talk about specifically like kind of last minute details of the game. So this is what we need to be doing. So I'll go into that. And then after that, usually get to the locker room. And that's when I kind of listen to more pump up music. And we usually have a big speaker in our locker room, either with Stanford or the US team. So kind of get everyone singing along, dancing along to whatever's playing to kind of lessen the nerves. I think if the locker room's super quiet, it gets pretty anxious right before a game. So we definitely try to mitigate that by just having some fun in the locker room before. I don't have any like specific thing I do with my cleats and like how I put them on or anything, but anytime before I come on the field, I like to do kind of 2 tuck jumps just to get myself ready. And then right before the game starts, I usually just like to kind of take a deep breath before the whistle blows and soak it all in and just kind of appreciate the fact that I'm able to play and appreciate the fact that I'm able to be on the field and just tell myself to have fun and enjoy it.
Awesome. One more question we got from the Q&A session here was, what advice would you give to female athletes looking to make it at the level you're at, and anything you wish you did differently on your way?
I would say the biggest thing, and this is not necessarily geared toward females, but just to follow your passions. I think that there's so many people who are kind of in soccer for too long that they feel like if they leave it, it's bad and they shouldn't, or it's part of their identity. Like, the reason that I have gone this far with soccer is because I truly love to play and I love to practice and I love to get better, and days where I don't get to play are sad for me. So I think like having that mentality is super important, and it doesn't need to be in soccer. It's in whatever you do. If you're passionate about it, you're more likely to want to improve at it. So I would say that's a huge piece of it. And then I think one thing that looking back I could have done better is just remaining confident in myself no matter what. And you know, you're gonna face setbacks and you're gonna face obstacles, but knowing what makes you you and knowing what makes you different and what makes you special is super important, and just remaining really confident in those things.
Awesome. That's some great advice. Now, before we wrap up here, we did have one more question on the docket, and was what the future is like for your career and for, I think you could say, the women's sport in general. Is there a big women's pro scene, or what are you looking to do once you graduate? What's the step after college to make?
Yeah, so there's a women's pro league in the U.S., the NWSL, and they it's really, really good competition. Most of the college soccer players in the U.S. go into that league. Unfortunately, female athletes still are not paid very well, so it's kind of hard to make a living and support yourself off of what they're making. So that's definitely a challenge. I think most of the women that are super successful and are able to kind of live comfortably are the ones that are also on the national team, which is obviously super, super hard to do. But I would love to play pro after college. I'm not really sure what that entails. There are a lot of leagues in Europe as well, and a lot of the super successful teams on the men's side are starting to have women's teams. So Barcelona has a team. Real Madrid is getting a team. Man U has a really good team. There's like a female version of the Premier League. So just because I grew up watching all of those games and, you know, loving Barcelona, I think it'd be really cool to just spend some time abroad and play in Europe, or play in a league somewhere that's not in the U.S. But I don't really know entirely what that entails as of right now, but I definitely want to continue to play after college, at least for a little bit.
It's fantastic. I know Newcastle has a women's team.
Yeah.
They're in the National League, so a little bit farther from the Premier League. But they're definitely like really active. I'm a Newcastle fan anyway, so
Okay.
I follow both sides of it.
Yeah.
So that's an option, just saying, because they're the best team right now.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome.
But no, I really appreciate you coming on and having a lot of really inspiring words for the sport and for young athletes kind of going through similar struggles as far as, you know, working to get to where you are and working to get to a higher level. So any parting words for them, or Michael, if you have any last questions for today?
No, I think that if you just any advice you'd want to give to a soccer player a couple years younger than you or around your age looking to improve their game.
Yeah, I would say have fun, number one. Enjoy what you're doing. And then I think that juggling has been a big thing for me, and especially during times where you don't have anyone to train with during the quarantine. Just juggling. I like to do high lows, I call them. So I'll take 3 touches low, and then I'll hit a ball higher, and then control it and do 3 touches low and hit a ball higher, just to work on ball control. So I think that juggling has been a huge part of improving my game. And just finding little fun things, you know, improving can happen however you want. So for me, sometimes just like kicking a ball really hard against a wall feels really good. And so I'll work on that and see how I can control that, and see how I can control a ball that's coming back at me really fast. So I think kind of a big theme that I talked about today is just having fun, because at the end of the day, you just want to be enjoying what you're doing. So I would focus on that first, and then juggling. Juggling is definitely a good way to improve.
I feel like the next generation of players is going to be like super technical and super quiet because their moms are going to be super mad at them for playing in the house.
Exactly.
Those sneakers around the field.
Yeah.
One of our women's side players wants to say thank you to you for coming on. So this is our thank you from her. Would it be okay if I shared your email address with her?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt, your check from Newcastle Women's is going to be in the mail. Your recruitment job, your attempted recruitment.
I actually had to pay shipping and handling on that one.
Well, Sierra, it's been awesome having you on. Thank you so much for joining us for District Brand Talks today. Obviously, it's pretty cool to see what you've been up to, and I think we're all looking forward to seeing you alongside Carly Lloyd and Megan Rapinoe for years to come.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
All right. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Thanks everyone for joining in, participating, and stay tuned for next week. I think we got some more exciting guests coming out.
Yep.
And thanks again to you, Sarah.
Michael, do you have the last slide?
Oh, I'm on the spot here. Let me pull it up real quick. Let's see.
Just because, you know, sponsors are nice and things.
Of course, we do have to give a good shout out to our great sponsors. And let me just share the screen real quick here.
While we're pulling that up, thank you to B&G Customs. That's a lot.
Sorry about that.
B&G Customs, providing all of our gear, one step beyond fitness, providing our mental, spiritual, and fitness conditioning, and leveling the playing field, making sure that all players, all athletes everywhere have access to equipment to be able to play not just our beautiful game, but sports around the country. So thank you, and we'll see everybody next time.
All right. Thanks again, Sierra.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.